Uh-oh. Motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. In women's bantamweight news, the IBF are set to order a third fight between Yoshida Metcalf, the reigning IBF champion, and Miyo Yoshida, the former champion. The IBF is set to order the rematch between the newly crowned women's bantamweight champion and former champion. This comes in response to protests filed by Yoshida's team following her unanimous decision defeat to Metcalf in November. Metcalf also defeated Yoshida by UD in November of the previous year, and it would seem that they're not done with each other. I saw the rematch, I saw their second meeting, and I have to be honest, I think that Yoshida was very fortunate to walk away with the decision and keep her IBF title, because the way it looked to me, it looked like she was getting pushed around. It looked like she was getting bullied by Miyo Yoshida. I picked Yoshida to win the first fight. Didn't have a horse in the race for the second, though having seen the second, I think it should have been Miyo Yoshida that had her hand raised. Neither fighter has seen action since that meeting in November, but Miyo Yoshida is about to this weekend at the Prudential Center when she faces Hungary's own Beata Dudek. Interesting particulars. Both times that Miyo and Yoshida fought each other, it was under the Lou DiBella Entertainment banner. Lou DiBella was the promoter of the show, whereas the promoter of this upcoming show that Miyo is fighting on is somebody else. Eric Ratchwall. So I'm not sure that Miyo Yoshida has any association, any further ties to Lou DiBella Entertainment at this time, but Yoshida's gonna have to deal with her, because if this news checks out and the IBF is set to order a rematch, she's on the hook and she has to fight her before Yoshida Metcalf has even had the chance to pursue a unification match with one of the other champions at this weight. We know that the WBA champion, Shernika Johnson, she's going to be fighting Nina Hughes for a second time. Another rematch. The only other champion at this weight, Denmark's own unified champion, Dina Thorsland, has been missing in action for some weeks and some months now. Haven't heard much from her. She's got 2 alphabet titles, so it's conceivable that so long as she hangs on to them, at some point, mandatories are going to get called. That's what's going on at 118 pounds right now. What are Miyo Yoshida's chances of winning back her blue belt, winning the IBF title, when, at least on paper, Yoshita's beat her 2 times? The saving grace for Miyo is that she's about to get out there one more time before facing Yoshida again at a later date, so she won't have any ring rust to shake off going into the fight, whereas Yoshida might, depending on how long it takes them to put that third fight together. And Yoshida is older than Miyo Yoshida by some years. Miyo Yoshida is 36, whereas Yoshida Metcalf is 39, very close to 40, and don't underestimate how long it might take to put that third fight together, because there's literally a whole year in between their first fight and their second fight. So could there be a year in between the second fight and the third? That all depends on who's gonna pay for it or who isn't. Neither Miyo Yoshida or Yoshida Metcalf are with a major promotional outfit, thus neither has the luxury of having things happen in a timely fashion. So whether or not Yoshida Metcalf will be able to hang on to the blue belt in the event that she fights Miyo again, I think that all depends on how long it takes to make that third fight, because she ain't getting any younger. She looked her age the last time I saw her. We'll see what happens. And super bantamweight news, former champion Mudajan Akhmadaliev is still bellyaching about that Inoue fight, saying, "It's ridiculous to hear Inoue's excuses for avoiding me." Of course, Mutajan MJ Akhmadaliev wants to be identified as a world champion again, but more than that, he longs for the opportunity to step in the ring against undisputed super bantamweight champion Inoue. In a Monday interview with Boxing Scene discussing his current position as an ignored WBA mandatory challenger to Japan's 4-division champion, Akhmadaliev delivered heartfelt responses over his push to land the bout.
Heartfelt responses is one way to put it. Bold-faced lies is another, and we'll get to that.
Akhmadaliev promoter Eddie Hearn of Matchroom said over the weekend that he expects the WBA to enforce its position and strip Inoue of his WBA title after he knocked out replacement opponent Jeet Kune Do
Yi-Jun Kim
Nutsukao on Friday in Tokyo and appears to be headed to a spring U.S. return bout against his WBC #1 contender Alan David Picasso of Mexico. I've been vocal about it. There are rules in boxing, and I want to fight him, Akhmadaliev said. I'm the mandatory. I'm a former unified champion. I want to fight the best. The best is Inoue. I don't want to just get the title. For some reason, that fight is not happening, and they've kept me frozen for almost 2 years. If he doesn't want to fight, what can I do? I cannot make him fight me. If people demand this fight, maybe it will change something. I want to fight him and prove. I know myself, my skills, my level, that I know I can beat him.
He says they've kept him waiting for close to 2 years. Buddy, you didn't become his mandatory challenger until the very end of 2023. So at the most, you've been waiting for a little over a year.
And a part of the reason you've been waiting is because you were the last guy to become his mandatory. The first was Luis Neri via the World Boxing Council. The second was Sam Goodman, and we see how much of Inoue's time that situation is consumed.
And then it was MJ after them.
So tell the whole story. Inoue's been fighting his mandatories in the rotation that they became his mandatories. Luis Neri, then it was supposed to be Sam Goodman, but you can't blame Inoue for Sam Goodman's bad luck. That fight between them was supposed to have already happened last year.
Let's think about something here for a second. MJ lost his 2 alphabet titles to Marlon Tapales in April of 2023. Matchroom didn't think enough of MJ to get him a rematch.
That's saying that you didn't bother to put a rematch clause into the contract between MJ and Marlon, which is fine. That's not always necessary, but you didn't pursue a rematch for MJ either.
In the absence of a rematch clause, that would have afforded MJ an immediate opportunity to win his titles back, so not only did you not cover all the bases before the fight, you didn't try to get him a rematch afterwards.
He comes back later on in the year against Kevin Gonzalez in a rebound fight. That was in December of 2023, and he sits out most of 2024, doesn't come back till December of that year, last year.
There's literally a year in between the Kevin Gonzalez fight and the Ricardo Franco fight.
So it's either Matchroom didn't prioritize keeping MJ busy, or MJ and his team didn't want to stay busy, didn't want to fight anywhere in between December of 2023 and December of 2024, that you could have squeezed in 2 fights in that time while you're belly aching.
But at the very most, that's a year, not 2. It's not how MJ is telling it.
That's a year in between the time you become the WBA's next mandatory challenger and now.
So stop exaggerating.
And so how could you accuse Inoue and his team of keeping you waiting for almost 2 years when he won the belts from Marlon in the same month that you became the WBA's mandatory? That was also in December of 2023.
Stop exaggerating.
I don't know what's going on, I really don't, Akhmadaliev said. Someone clearly doesn't want this fight to happen, whether it's him, his team, his promoters. I don't know who does that. Usually, fighters will fight anyone, but definitely someone doesn't want this fight to happen because I've been waiting for a very long time. Somehow, they find a way to avoid the fight.
More bullshit.
By the time that MJ became his mandatory in December of 2023, there were already 2 mandatories in the queue. You were never going to be next, and you were never going to be the guy after next.
You weren't the next Mando in the rotation. You don't want to acknowledge that? You don't have to. I will.
He's giving opportunities to other guys. Okay, I don't mind that. But there is a line that does not exist for them.
You mean TJ Doheny, who he fought as a late replacement for his mandatory, or Yi-Jun Kim, who he fought as a late replacement for his mandatory.
Because those are the only guys he gave opportunities. Late replacements for Sam Goodman, who not once but twice has postponed that mandated title fight.
It's 3 times, actually. It's 3.
And so perhaps Inoue and or his handlers are moving patiently to take on the lesser foe in Picasso in the United States before moving to a planned bout in Saudi later on this year. Asked if he was okay with that scenario or trusted it will happen, Akhmadaliev said, "I'm at a point I don't trust anyone. The great champions have always defended their belts. That's the rules. I honored 3 mandatories in 18 months. It's ridiculous to hear Inoue's excuses."
What do you think he's doing? He's honoring mandatories, you bozo.
I'm ready to fight him anytime, anywhere. I'm ready to go to Vegas, Japan, Saudi. I'm ready to go anywhere to get my opportunity against the best fighter in the world. As Inoue moves to Picasso, Akhmadaliev, coming off a 3rd-round TKO of Ricardo Espinoza Franco in December, said he would huddle with his team to determine his own next fight. "I want to get in the ring," Akhmadaliev said.
You know why he's frustrated? Because he's very close to fighting for all the marbles against Inoue, so he has to tread carefully while he waits in the in-between time, and they don't want to take on any risky fights between now and the time that they fight Inoue.
He insists he brings the skill set to defeat Inoue, just not to defeat Marlon Tapales, apparently. Inoue is a great fighter. I've never doubted his skills, his power, how fast and smart he is, Akhmadaliev said, but I'm not no pushover either. Has he ever faced a 122-pounder? I don't think so.
What do you think Stephen Fulton was?
He's fought all these guys moving up from 108, 112, 115, whatever. I'm a 122-pounder.
You know who else was a 122-pounder? Marlon Tapales. I like how you conveniently leave him out of your equation.
I am stronger than anyone he's faced. I'm physically in my prime right now. I have a great chin. I have speed. There are layers to my skills. If I get an opportunity for this fight and it ever gets made, I'll do my best to show the world how good I am.
Would I have preferred to see Inoue versus MJ instead of Inoue versus TJ or Inoue versus Yi Jun Kim? Of course.
But what Inoue's critics are not factoring into the equation, and what MJ is failing to mention, is that those guys were late replacements for another mandatory.
All of this is a byproduct of Sam Goodman's constant delays.
So when you have to omit certain parts of the story, not acknowledge them altogether, to make your case, it's very clear. You're deliberately misrepresenting things to make it seem like they're running from you.
You gotta admit though, Picasso shouldn't be getting a shot before MJ.
That I will concede, but only because MJ's being a crybaby about it. He claims they've kept him waiting for almost 2 years. Inoue hasn't been champion that long. He won the WBA title in December of 2023. Last month makes 1 year. So where do you get they've kept you on ice for that long, when you were never going to be next or the guy after next?
Just wait your turn and shut up.
Men's junior middleweight news per veteran boxing scribe Dake Jonovan. An update for the purse bid heads. Pro Box 1, Erickson Lubin versus RDL Holmes purse bid, edging out Salida Promotions by just $5,000. Lubin versus Holmes, IBF Eliminator, assigned to determine the next mandatory challenger for Bakram Murtazaliev, to which a Twitter user that goes by the name Mr. Pullup asked, did the PBC's TGB even bid? And here's where Jake Donovan got creative with his answer. Gary Jonas, who owns ProBox, has a long, solid history with Lubin and also the PBC. It's not outside of the question that the fight could land on one of its shows, or just on ProBox, which has previously housed PBC fighters. In that regard, pointless for both to bid, which is just a roundabout way of saying no. No, they didn't.
It's a yes or no question. Did TGB Promotions put in a bid for the fight or not?
Jake Donovan, fully aware of the implications, what it would mean if TGB didn't bother or if TGB didn't win the rights for the fight, whatever the case.
He's saving face for the PBC. He's trying to spare them the embarrassment that yet another one of their fighters is being outsourced to somebody else's banner, to somebody else's platform, somebody else's show, because they themselves don't have the money to accommodate what used to be their fighters.
Not for a guy like Erickson Lubricant, who already has 2 losses, both of which he was knocked out in.
No marquee value, inactive for over a year. Now, in case you're not aware, Erickson Lubricant sat out all of last year.
He got a gift decision, what I interpreted as a gift decision over Jesus Ramos in September of 2023, won some kind of version of a WBC title, which I thought might have lined him up for a shot with them. Apparently, he's going the IBF route over a year later.
Currently on a 2-fight winning streak, he knocked out Luis Arias in June of 2023, then decisioned Jesus Ramos in September.
And he was on the WBC route then. He seems to be going the IBF route now for a shot at newly crowned, undefeated IBF champion Bakhram Murtazaliev. But let's be honest, that's not the real story here. That's not what we're all paying attention to. What we're all paying attention to is that the PBC cannot accommodate their fighters, and this is yet another glaring example that TGB didn't bother to put in a bid for this fight, and that by all accounts it doesn't look to be happening as part of a PBC show, PBC on Amazon, that so many heralded as the savior.
When news broke well over a year ago that Showtime would be exiting from the sport of boxing and that the PBC were in the market for a new broadcast partner, very briefly, DAZN expressed an interest in going to business with them. And I remember that many a Haymanite blew off that idea. They didn't like the idea that the PBC could end up on DAZN after so many years of trashing that platform.
Tantamount to acquiescence of defeat that DAZN has outlasted you and Showtime, where you used to scoff at them. They liked the idea that PBC would go to Amazon.
Not DAZN. They didn't want them to go there, thinking that Amazon would provide PBC with the same kind of war chest they used to have in the days of Waddle and Reed and all of that money.
That is now gone with very little to show for it, that so many of the PBC's fighters are popping up all over the place. Carlos Adames, Rayo Valenzuela, Isaac Cruz on Riyadh Season shows, Frankie Sanchez,
Deontay Wilder from Riyadh Season over to Black Prime, but not the PBC.
Jarrett Hurd and Jason Rosario boxed on a Pro Box main event, a Pro Box show, and now it looks like Erickson Lubricant will be joining them, all accenting the same thing. The PBC can no longer afford to accommodate all of their fighters, so they're outsourcing them. It's all they can do.
Joey Spencer was on Pro Box not that long ago. Michel Rivera, he left the PBC to go to Dimitri Salita. Elvis Rodriguez left the PBC to go back to Top Rank.
Luis Ortiz is rumored to be facing Lawrence Okoli on a Queensbury Promotions show.
It all accents the same thing. Why is it not encouraging? Well, if the PBC had the same kind of relationship with Amazon that they used to have with Showtime, they'd be using all of these fighters to do their own shows, their own cards. The fact that they're not.
They aren't using them, instead outsourcing them, communicates the gravity of their current predicament, their current situation.
Canelo Alvarez is rumored to have inked a 3-fight deal with Turkey LL Sheik, and by that reckoning, I guess he's done with the PBC, so they won't have his shows to promote this year.
In the previous one, they did a grand total of 5 shows. Just 5. 2 of which were Canelo's fights, and you don't have him anymore. So for anyone who was holding out hope that this calendar year would be a more productive year, a more active year for the PBC than the last one was, it's not looking that way. Not when Erickson Lubricant is the latest PBC fighter to jump ship and end up on somebody else's platform. Irrespective of whether or not Gary Jonas borrowed a cup of sugar from Tom Brown 2 years ago in Miami.
Who cares?
You know what this is, just as much as I do, and it's not looking good for the PBC. This year may turn out to be another abysmal year for the premier boxing champions, if they have any left.
They still got 1 or 2.